There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello BookTube, I'm Shawn the Book Maniac. Welcome back to my channel. Here I am, I'm so excited to finally bring to you my review of this 2019 novella from Canada, The Student by Cary Fagan. Cary Fagan is a man, in case you were wondering. He is a Canadian writer and often writes fiction with Jewish characters. That's all I know about his biography. I don't need to know any more to tell you that even though it's only May of 2020, this will be one of my very top reads of the year. I absolutely loved it. The story opens in 1957 with a university student named Miriam Moskowitz. She is in her final year of her bachelor's degree in English literature at the University of Toronto. It's very much a Toronto novel. I lived in Toronto for years, so it was really quite a little bit later than the late 1950s. I lived there in the 2000s. Is that right? Yeah, I think so. No. I lived there in the 90s. It brought the city wonderfully alive for me, and I was Googling things to see how much had changed. Not only since 1957, when Miriam Moskowitz was walking through a building or walking down a street, but also how much those locales had changed since I left in about the year 1999 or 2000. But I don't think you have to be familiar with Toronto to love this novel. Not at all. I will talk at the end of this about how difficult this book is to find, but if you don't want to watch that maybe ranty, rambly conclusion to this video, I will just say at the outset, probably the easiest way you're going to get a copy of this, if you don't live in Canada, is to contact someone in Canada and ask them to buy it for you and send it to you. And maybe send them a book from your country or something, trade, because it's ridiculously difficult at the moment to get your hands on this beautiful novel. As I was starting to say, Miriam is in the final year of her bachelor's in English literature, and she wants to go on to grad school. She lives in a Jewish family with loving 1950s parents and a younger brother, and she's a bit, not prickly, but she is not an open book, shall we say. She's difficult to get to know. She can be a little bit persnickety and difficult. And underneath that is a wonderfully witty sense of humor and a deeply inquiring mind. The way that this novel shows the sexism and the anti-Semitism that she has to contend with, it's understated and thus wonderfully done, powerfully shown by its very understatedness. If you have any women in your life that would have been coming of age in the late 1950s, you are going to be thinking of them so deeply as you read this really compelling and beautifully rendered story about the obstacles that she faced and the determination that she had to follow her bliss. She wants to go into grad studies and she meets an obstacle that will just break your heart. And she's also exploring her sexuality. She has friends. Cary Fagan, in this novella at least, I haven't read anything else Cary Fagan has written. I intend to rectify that soon. There's quite a backlist. But in this novella, he has such a light touch, and I kept gasping throughout the novella at how character was brought so three-dimensionally on the page by just a lightly told anecdote, or a sudden twist, or a thought. Just gorgeously done. I don't think I need to say any more about the plot, other than that then there's a time jump, and we go to, I think the year, 2005, also Toronto, and with Miriam continuing to be our protagonist. She is now, I think, around 70, and there is a family wedding. I am not going to say any more about the second, it's maybe the final third of the novel, the 2005 portion, other than that it maybe didn't work quite as well. It maybe didn't pack quite the punch that the 1957 section did, but it was still really beautiful and I loved it. And the ending, I didn't expect it to hit so close to home for me, and it did, and I'm not going to say any more than that. Boy, I am going to be following Cary Fagan's literary career from here on in. I want to read you a longish passage, it's about a page and a bit, from the 1957 chunk, the first two-thirds of the novella, and it is about a friend of the family's He is a refugee from Europe who comes to Canada early in the 1950s or late in the 1940s. He is a Holocaust survivor, and he arrives in Canada, and he is sponsored to live in Canada and pursue a life there, here, there. I'm not there now, so I will say there. And he's a bit of an odd duck. And I just couldn't believe how this man, Andre, just comes to life in, again, just deft strokes of description that by the end not only brought Andre to life, but made me understand the protagonist, Miriam, who's barely in this scene I'm going to read to you, added a fourth or fifth dimension to her character. So I just remember this was one of those gasp-worthy passages where I said, how did he do that? Andre is just now this living being in my brain, and Miriam all the more so. References made to Miriam's baby brother, I think he's about 8 or 10 or something now, Brian, and very brief mention to one of her friends, Faga. Here it is. Her family had known Andre Unterman for 5 years, 7 if she counted the letters he wrote before his disembarkation in Halifax. Back in the letter days, Miriam used to refer to him as the sad case, as in, have we received another missive from the sad case? Her father used to get very angry, and, really, how could she have made fun of a young man who had lost his parents, his sisters, his brothers, his grandparents, his aunts and uncles? Because his written English wasn't perfect? Reading these letters aloud at the supper table, her father would leave out parts that he considered too disturbing, and she would have to go hunting for them afterwards. When the war was over, and he had recovered some of his strength, he'd been permitted to go to school in Zurich, and from there had been accepted at the University of Toronto, on the condition that he find a sponsor. Jewish Immigrant Aid Services had contacted her father. His heartfelt desire, Andre Unterman wrote to the Moskowitz family, was to become a lawyer and work within the strictures of the great British legal system, which would never have allowed such atrocities. Her father agreed to ensure that he did not become a burden on Canadian society. 3 days after his arrival, he came to the house for Friday dinner. Her father recited the Brockau over the bread and wine, but Andre did not say as much as an amen. When asked a question, he would think an uncomfortably long time before answering. His most frequent expression was, thank you. Thank you for the invitation, for being asked to sit down, for being offered the brisket, for water. He didn't eat much. Her mother served apple strudel for dessert, and as he looked at his piece, he began to weep, his narrow shoulders trembling. Andre had already found a place to live, a boarding house on Markham Street. He was soon working at 2 part-time jobs, in a shoemaking factory near the waterfront and delivering parcels by wobbly bicycle. He came every Friday night, but after 2 years of undergraduate study and 3 in law school, he still looked undernourished. It was hardly surprising that he adored them. He nodded gravely at her father's pronouncements, leapt up to help her mother carry a dish, and after dinner he sat patiently with Brian, examining the latest entries in his scrapbook dedicated to the space program. For a long time he seemed unsure about Miriam, possibly because she wasn't as nice as the others. Of course he's in love with me, Miriam told Faga. I'm the first girl he met here. Over time, he grew easier around her and learned to make mild jokes at her expense, or offer some remark to deliberately rile her up. She would start to rant, and then the trick would dawn on her, and she would laugh. So there is a taste of The Student by Cary Fagan. I cannot recommend this novella highly enough. I'll stop that rave and then move into a brief rant about Canadian publishing. I don't think this is just a Canadian problem, but England and America aside, why is it so goddamn difficult to get books internationally? This book, you are not allowed to buy this book and get it shipped internationally from the publisher. Even though they have an ebook, you can't buy the ebook from them. I am not ranting about the publisher, Freehand Books. I've been in email contact with them. They seem like lovely people, and they brought this book into the world. And they are probably following Canadian publishing rules. I am really naive and stupid about that kind of thing, but that is not going to stop me from ranting. Maybe Amazon Canada has a few copies that they will ship internationally. Go to bookfinder.com, Abe Books. I've checked them all in the last month, and there were a few copies where it looked like they would ship internationally. It hasn't been picked up, the publishing rights in other countries, so it's landlocked within the confines of Canada. Like I said at the beginning, the best bet is coax one of your Canadian friends to buy it for you and ship it to you. that might be the only way you can get your hands on it in the short term. But can we, and again, I'm not specifically talking about this publisher or Canada, but I think this is a bigger problem in places like Canada and Australia and so on. Can we not put away childish things? Like, if you're going to publish a book, ship it anywhere that somebody wants to buy it. I'm willing to pay the shipping charges. And especially if you're selling an ebook. I mean, books should be just available everywhere all the time. Like, I sometimes roll my eyes about people complaining about how hard it is to get a book because, there are places to go to buy books online that will ship anywhere in the world. You don't need me to mention the names of those online booksellers, but this book you can't find at any of those sites because it's just not being made available outside Canada. That sucks. It's just so... it's like DVD region codes. Like, just put away childish things, can we? I want to get this book into all of your hands, and I don't know how. That's the teary ending of my rant. Beg, borrow, or steal, but keep this on your radar. Hopefully in the future it will be easier to track down. In the meantime, I love this and hope that you will too. Thanks for watching.